Yeah, I was gonna say we'll begin, and I'm gonna have to move some of these little windows off my side here. So welcome for those of you who are joining. So nice to see
Hello.
everybody. If you don't mind, just put in the chat, can you see our slides? I'm just going to advance through one. I'm hoping you can see and hear us okay. Just give us a little thumbs up in the chat if you are currently engaged and not multitasking. You can interact. And we are going to begin. As we know, the session is being recorded. So if you're coming in late or you have to leave or move away from your computer, not a problem. So welcome, everybody. I'm Dina D'Alessandro. We'll do some formal introductions in a moment. I'm really excited to be hosting another, I should say, co-hosting another one of these free monthly wellness webinars, especially with Laura, because this is kind of the positive stuff that I take away of the social media world and living on the internet as much as I do, is we get to make new friends, new colleagues, especially for those of us who are sharing the same kind of mission and vision. So I'm very honored to have Laura as a co-facilitator here. And we will talk about what to expect. But before we go into some of the more formal information to share with you, some housekeeping things to keep in mind. This is, as you heard, a recorded session. We do appreciate if you can leave your microphone off. You can turn your camera on if you want to, but this is going to eventually be distributed on a larger scale after the event, both to registrants and eventually onto our other platforms like our YouTube channels. So if you do not want to be seen, you can keep your camera off. You can use your chat box at any time to put questions and comments and feedback in there. We'll be monitoring that over the course of the presentation, but we will also save a more formal discussion towards the end of our presentation to do a Q&A. Now, while Laura and I are healthcare professionals, we are not your healthcare professionals. So just keep in mind that this webinar is to share general information and guidance. Please make sure that you are meeting with any kind of your own personal healthcare team before you begin any sort of regimen, or reach out to people that you might need to get in touch with if you are not already working with a healthcare provider. At the end of, not exactly immediately at the end of this, probably within the next day or two, you'll receive some follow-up emails from both Laura and or I, where we will provide to you the recording link, one of our free downloadable things, which we'll talk about at the end of our discussion. And as mentioned in the registration page, you are automatically signed up for our distribution list. I mean, Laura, I'm on yours and I think you're on mine. We don't bombard people, but if you feel like you need to opt out, you are more than welcome to do that. But you will be on our newsletter list. So we hope that will get to learn a little bit more about what we do, and you hope that you enjoy this discussion. Laura, I'm going to turn this over to you so you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Sgro. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, licensed therapist. I hail from Los Angeles. And so Dean and I were just chatting about the weather, and she was like, it's so rainy and gloomy. And I'm like, it is not that here. Yeah, so real quick, I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but basically I have a private practice. It's virtual. So I get to work with folks all across the state of California, which is really awesome. I also create mental health content on social media. And as Dina shared, I have a newsletter where my hope with that is to be able to provide accessible mental health, just tips, tricks, all that kind of stuff for folks who maybe aren't able to join my practice because of license restrictions, or, I can't be the right therapist for everybody. So I work a lot with folks who struggle with perfectionism and people pleasing, anxiety, trauma, dysfunctional relationships, that kind of thing. And when I'm not working, I love snuggling with my cat. I love hiking. I love being outdoors. I love reading. I just try to live as dynamic of a life as possible.
That is lovely. Thank you, Laura. And for those of you who don't know me, I am a registered dietitian nutritionist. I'm based out of downtown Lower Manhattan in New York City. I also spend a lot of time on the virtual space through my virtual platform called Dish with Dina. So if you are on social media, you might come across that. And I would love for you to follow me or engage with me or interact with me in some way. And what I do here in my weekly life is a variety of different things. I own and run a part-time private practice where I meet with my own patients through that. I also am the campus nutritionist up at Lehman College in the Bronx here in New York City, where I work with a wide variety of our student population. I also do a lot of kind of independent contractor gigs where I staff as a dietitian for people's corporate wellness events, health fairs, lunch and learns, webinars, etc., and just such a wide variety of things. I have some specialties that I tend to focus a little bit more on as far as people with diabetes or health related conditions that put them at risk for things like cardiovascular disease. But I also really like sharing information for a wide range of conditions, and I try to meet people where they're at in order to help them meet their health and wellness goals. So that is a little bit about me. What Laura and I discussed, when we were first designing this webinar is I said I want to embrace this word resolutions. I feel like it's gotten a real bad rap in the past few years. So if the word does not necessarily resonate with you, feel free to choose a different word. But we're really hoping that you take away some of these objectives where we allow you to understand a little bit more about how to create what's called sustainable resolutions, things that are going to help you lead and live in a more successful way when you're trying to make new habits or break old ones. And also this thing about establishing resilience, that ability to bounce back. Laura will also talk about the term perfectionism, and I'll share a little bit too about some examples of how that shows up in the food and nutrition world. And then we really want to spend the kind of the end of the discussion talking about how you can help set yourself up with some goals that are realistic and sustainable going forward. When we're at right now at the time of this discussion, right, we're at the end of January, and statistically speaking, people who set up typical New Year's resolutions, about 80% of them do not make it by the end of this month. I think that's because a lot of people come in quite ambitiously and might have in their mindset that I'm going to be a different person this year. We also tend to overestimate what we can achieve in one year, especially when we're making these new critical changes to our habits. It takes a while to kind of undo things or unlearn things that we're so used to. And I always try to tell people to be patient with themselves. We also at least I've seen this, and Laura probably seen this too, this unrealistic expectations, which we'll talk more about at the end of the webinar, about setting yourself up for something that might feel like there's no way you can achieve it, or not allowing yourself enough time to get things done. And then the after effects or the outcomes are such that you are like, forget it, I give up, instead of just leading and living with compassion towards yourself and trying again. We also want to share with you some tools, resources, strategies through our online platforms and through our follow-up emails as well, and also within our conversation today to make sure that you are able to sustain whatever efforts you're making going forward. And this way you kind of don't have to worry about relapsing or just, again, leading with some grace and giving yourself some grace if you do happen to fall off track. Laura, I'll turn this over to you.
Yeah. So as Dina just shared, we know I've seen this in my own life. I've seen this with friends, family, clients, everyone, that, a lot of people do tend to set themselves up in such a way with their resolutions or their goals that like it's just it's so hard for those expectations to actually happen. And here's why. So the problem with traditional resolutions, as most people tend to create them, is so for one thing, a lot of times they're a result of feeling pressured, right? So maybe you're comparing yourself to somebody else, or you're seeing what somebody else has done, or you're feeling a certain pressure from someone in your life or your job or something. And so it's not really about you or your values or your ambitions or your goals. It's about maybe an expectation from somebody else, or it's about, oh, I have to do this or else it might say something about me, right? And so that's not really very values aligned. That's a big problem. We're not going to be able to stick to something that doesn't come from inside of our heart. A lot of times there's unrealistic expectations. That's probably the number one thing that I see in my work with folks who are like, well, I'm just going to suddenly transform my entire life and eat healthy and exercise every day, even though I don't have any extra time than I did last month in December. Right. And so how are we supposed to make that happen when it doesn't match up with our lives, right? Comparing to others, lack of flexibility. I'm going to do it this way or else I'm a failure, right? I'm going to do it this way or it has to look like this or else it says something about me or else something. And so when we don't have that kind of flexibility to be able to transition and change and practice resilience, which I will talk about later, we're setting ourselves up for unrealistic expectations, for potential, failure, for things of that nature. And a lot of times it's really just based in this perfectionistic idea of what things should look like. And that's not realistic. So, you've heard me use this word already probably like 5 times. Let's talk a little bit about what perfectionism is. As I said, I specialize in working with folks who struggle with this, and I am what I call a recovering perfectionist myself. So I've walked the walk as well. Basically, perfectionism is a group of like characteristics where it's almost like you're grading yourself every day, like you're in school, but you can never, ever, ever get that A. Like you're constantly holding yourself to some standard or trying to get yourself to meet some expectation or some bar, but it's impossible or it's really unrealistic. And so here are some of the traits that I see in a lot of folks that I work with, right? Setting unrealistic standards for yourself, procrastinating, feeling unable to try new things, being super afraid of failure. We've talked about, not having flexibility. It's a lot of all or nothing thinking a lot of the time. Either I have to do things perfectly or else I'm a failure. Either this has to show up a certain way or it's worthless. So it's a lot of that kind of thinking, pressuring yourself to overwork because there's this assumption perhaps that like working more, working harder equals success, even if that's not necessarily true and certainly not always healthy. A lot of times, folks who struggle with perfectionism also struggle to acknowledge success or small wins that they may have or small victories they achieve, and it's focused on this like end result rather than the process, rather than the journey, right? And so you miss a lot of things along the way and create this narrative about how you're never good enough because you haven't reached this, impossible end result yet. So you might view things again as a failure if they don't go completely as planned. And certainly one of the key pieces of perfectionism is that you're never feeling good enough. No matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, there's always someone that's doing more. There's always more that you could do. You're not measuring up. And so over time, obviously, this is going to lead to anxiety. This is going to lead to maybe feeling depressed or feeling like you don't feel very good about yourself. There's a lot of consequences that come with this kind of thinking, but it's so common and so ingrained a lot of the time, especially depending on how you were raised or what kinds of experiences you've had. So this is cognitive distortions is a fancy word for basically the way that we think that's really unhelpful. And I'm including this slide here because I think that this goes hand in hand with perfectionism. I think it goes hand in hand with when we're setting up our goals and setting up expectations for what that's supposed to look like. And so there's a couple different thinking patterns here that I just want to call out. And maybe, if any of these resonate with you, feel free to write that in the chat. But basically we might be catastrophizing, right? Thinking that the worst case scenario is going to happen. And in the role of perfectionism, maybe it's like if I don't do, the most, if I don't do this thing perfectly, I'm going to get fired from my job, right? We're already assuming the worst case scenario, even though that's quite a jump from A to B. A thing that I see a lot is magnifying things that feel negative, right? Things that you're not doing well enough, but minimizing the things that you're succeeding at or achieving or doing really great at. That's something that happens a lot. We tend to have a very negative view or negative bias in our brain, and that's just kind of how the human brain works. So we have to really train ourselves to think a little bit more broadly. Emotional reasoning. This is the idea that I feel a certain way, so the thing must be this way. I feel like I am not doing good enough at work, so it must mean that I'm actually a failure at work. That's probably not true, right? We're always our harshest critic, and that's not necessarily what other people are thinking about us. Overgeneralizing. I myself can be guilty of this at times. I can be guilty of all of these at times. Where a certain situation happens and then it becomes a defining feature of everything else about you or about the situation. So I might say, oh, I like kind of made a mistake on this project. That must mean I'm terrible at my job. And you're noticing maybe that I'm using work as an example a lot of the time. And these examples, I'm just kind of pulling them out of the air, but the reality is so many of us struggle with perfectionism, especially at work, or goal setting, especially at work. Dina, you might see this happening in the food, nutrition, exercise space. And that's definitely something that I see a lot with I'm going to skip ahead to the shoulding on yourself, which is one of my favorite phrases because I think it sticks. I should be able to exercise 6 times a week. I mean, depending on your life circumstances, that's really, really hard to do. If you're exercising once a week, let's celebrate that, right? So this should idea that a lot of time comes with comparisons. A lot of times that comes back to this idea of feeling really pressured, right? Maybe by people around you or, you're just what you see on social media. We could have a whole other side discussion about how that plays in here, right? And so, another thing we talked about, the all or nothing thinking. This is the number one thing I see that impacts perfectionism, that impacts goal setting. And when we talk later about resilience, we're going to really challenge this, because this all or nothing thinking, if I don't stick to my goals, I'm a failure. If I drop off on my eating habits one time, what's the point? It means, I can't do anything. If I make a mistake here, I'm incapable of getting anything done. Like, it's really self-defeating, and it doesn't motivate you to do the things that you're trying to do. It doesn't leave any room for that flexibility that we've been talking about. So that's a really, really big one that I encourage folks to think about. If this is happening in your brain, if it's really that black and white sort of thing that you're noticing, we want to be in the middle of the spectrum, right? I made a mistake this week, and you know what? I'm just gonna learn from that and try a little harder next week. Or, you know what? I didn't exercise as many times this week as I wanted to, but I'm just gonna try more next week. Like, it's okay, right? That doesn't mean that it's zero. Disqualifying the positive, we talked a little bit about that. And of course, jumping to conclusions is a big one. Assuming what other people are thinking about us, assuming how we're presenting to the world based on our choices or our actions, even though we might not have evidence that those things are true. So, if anyone has questions about this, write that in the chat. We can address them at the end. But these are just some of the thinking patterns, distortions that can really poison our self worth, for one thing, but also how we approach goal setting, and why so often goal setting and making resolutions can be a really like painful and unrealistic process.
Laura, I'm so glad that you defined some of these terms because I am entering into my I'm in my fifth decade of life, and I'm still resolving some things. I'm still noticing patterns for myself, and maybe some of the attendees who are
Yeah.
here or people who are watching this later will start recognizing that pattern too. And that's really where having discussions with people like you, therapists who can help them break down some of those things as to why are these things happening, and doing some deep work and really reflecting on, just like you said, when I do X, then I feel Y, but why am I reacting in that way? So thank you for
Mhm.
sharing so much in-depth information about this. And I look forward to having more conversations in the future with you and with the attendees, the registrants as well.
Yeah, and one thing I'm
Oh,
just gonna throw onto that
yeah.
before you hop into your slide is, if this happens, if you start to notice some of these thought patterns, especially as we're talking about, again, goal setting, making resolutions, planning for your future, etc., I want you to ask yourself, what is the function of this thought process? If I'm,
Mhm.
catastrophizing, if I'm shooting on myself, why? Is it helping you? Is it making you feel better? Is it motivating you? Most likely not. So if you get stuck in this kind of thought pattern, if you notice these cognitive distortions happening, ask yourself that question. What's the function here? And can I transform this into something that's a little bit more helpful?
I love that. Thank you, Laura.
Of
And so,
course.
how this kind of shows up in the world of food and eating and nutrition, what I see sometimes too, and I'm just going to preempt this with a little side note that while I have spent the last 7 years of being 7.5 years of being a dietitian, really adjusting my approach and making sure that I'm taking a much more weight and food neutral discussion in my sessions, it is probably very prevalent, if not the majority of people that come to work with me, always focus on weight management of some sort. And it's not your fault because we are being bombarded with what is considered to be, ideal ways of looking. We are bombarded with television advertisements, especially in the beginning of the year, but quite literally everything that we see is either labeled or marketed in a way that makes us really question if we are good enough or how our worth is placed just by the size of our body. And so I bring this up because so many times when we see perfectionism showing up in the eating world, it's because we're making changes to things that I'm going to stop eating this way. I'm going to remove this stuff out of my diet. I'm going to, clean up my meals and however you're defining that. But what ends up happening, especially if you continue along the process, which I'll share in a second too, of kind of like this roller coaster of I've tried it, I've not done well. well, let me try it harder next time. And then I'm kind of chasing after an outcome that is probably not sustainable or realistic for you. We can see more things that are physiological issues like nutrient deficiencies. So we're removing food either through fear or trying to limit or restrict our intake to something. And in doing so, now we've removed some of the essential micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals from our eating patterns and from our meals. And that affects our body functions. Our bodies rely on a variety of things to eat. And the way that our cells function too, this thing kind of unlocks this thing, and it works as a partnership in our bodies. So when we remove something, we can end up becoming deficient. Hormonal imbalances. This has a lot to do also with body fat distribution. And a lot of times I'll see people trying to adhere to a very, very extreme way of eating or engaging in physical activity to reduce their body fat. But your body fat is needed for hormone synthesis. It's needed to keep you safe and protected. It also has a role in the way that we ingest and metabolize our vitamins, like our fat soluble vitamins. And it's also needed for reproduction too. So I see sometimes people will end up screwing up the way that their hormones or reproductive health can be because of the choices that they're making and the restrictive approaches that they're taking to food and nutrition. Physical and mental health impact, as Laura was just saying too, but even if you're going into the whether it's formally or not so formally defined disordered eating area where people are now becoming very restrictive or super um, protective of, I guess, the choices that they're making, and it's affecting even things like socializing or their ability to have just like a comfortable relationship with food, that could really cause an issue down the line as well. People might hide how they're feeling. They might, again, make some certain choices that are going to put them, separate them out, feel a little bit isolated, and that can really play a role in your mental health too. Digestive issues, food restrictions, avoidances. I always say coffee is not a meal. People, stop pretending it is. Make sure you eat something hearty and things like that. If you're taking in a lot of fiber or a lot of caffeine, you're going to end up with an upset belly. And that's kind of the least of your problems with a lot of the things that you see on here, but it can alter. And Laura, I know you and I have talked about the gut brain axis many
Oh,
times.
yes.
There's a very big relationship between the way that our brain functions and the way that our vagus nerve and our gastrointestinal system functions too. So if you're altering your immune microenvironment, if you're messing with the bugs in your gut, all of those good bacteria that are helping you build up your immune system and doing other kinds of cellular functions internally, it can also mess with your mental health too. It can make you feel brain foggy and vice versa. If you're stressing out over something, when you eat, you might feel like you can't stomach something, right? It's hard to digest that. So stomach pain, bloating, etc. The metabolic impact, I want to talk a little bit about weight cycling. So this is sometimes what I see of people saying, I want to get beach body ready, or I'm getting ready for my wedding, and they're trying to drop a significant amount of pounds in a very unrealistic short amount of time. And not so fun fact, our body doesn't love when we do that. So the minute you are unable to sustain or maintain the habits that got you to where your outcome is, you're going to start seeing pounds come back on. And I mention this only because weight cycling, which is repeated periods of losing and gaining regularly, ends up causing a lot of fluctuations in so many parts of your body, including heart health, cardiovascular risk factors, blood pressure, your heart rate, what's known as a sympathetic activity as well, resting energy expenditure, all these fancy words that I'm saying here, everything that is related to how your body needs food to exist and create its own fun, right? Doing this, I'm just moving my arms. That's carbohydrates at work and oxygenated blood. So anytime you're putting that at risk, you're really causing a lot of disruption on a metabolic level. And then the life-threatening consequences there too. So if it does get into the part where it's eating disorder related, you're really restrictive in things, or you're denying yourself a significant amount of necessary micronutrients over a long period of time, if you continue to pursue this unrealistic ideal, then you end up causing yourself a long-term issue that, in worst case scenario, can end up leading to critical illness or unfortunately death.
Yeah, and I just want to add on here, like this is so relevant when we're talking about resolutions, when we're talking about goal setting. I don't know how many people I've talked to in my life where, we're talking about goal setting, we're doing our vision boards for the year and all that fun stuff. And I hear someone say, "Oh, I want to lose weight. I want to lose X amount of weight, right? And so that very perhaps innocuous goal or that innocuous idea, I could go on a whole side tangent about like, why are we pressuring ourselves to do that? Where is that coming from, right?
Mm-hmm.
But B, even if you genuinely want your body to look a little different, whatever, that's fine. This is really what we're talking about here is like that innocuous idea turns into some of these things if we go into it with a perfectionistic, unrealistic, unsustainable, inflexible
Mm.
idea of how we're going to lose weight or gain weight if that's your goal or whatever the goal might be. But when
Yeah,
we're talking about, bodily changes or the way that we want our bodies to look, there's the whole side discussion about like where's that coming from? What's the intention behind that? And then how are we actually supporting our bodies in making those changes? And how are we making them sustainable so we don't burnout, have these life-threatening consequences, avoid nutrients, et cetera, et cetera.
absolutely. Just a quick shameless plug for next month, where we're going to talk about things like self-love and self-image and self-esteem. A lot of those things come into play about being able to just embrace who you are and what those choices are
Yeah.
that you're making to support that. Thanks, Laura. On here, I think I'm going first, right? This is the slide that we have some of the sustainable discussions.
There's a lot of words
A
here.
lot,
We're going to
a
split
lot
it
of
up.
words. I'm going to try not to read this in like bullet form, but I do want to just share as far as taking a sustainable strategy, right? Something that is going to be long-term approaches to something. It really does focus on, I think, a few things. Number one is flexibility and freedom, allowing yourself to make and change things like game day changing, allowing yourself, as Laura was saying before, to have some trial and error without judgment in that sense as well. We live in a world of immediate gratification. I'm going to encourage everybody. One of my key words, aside from resilience this year, one of my key words or key terms is slow down. So allow myself not just the ability to really take time and be patient with myself and whatever it is I'm doing, but also slow down with the way that my brain wants to judge me, of saying, let me process what just happened. Let me take a look at that. What's the worst case scenario? How am I dealing with this? Is that really what's happening there? So on the
In,
left-hand side, yeah, go ahead,
in
Laura.
therapy land, we call that mindfulness. I love
Ah,
it.
I love mindfulness is a key word. I love that. I love that. So on the left-hand side, we're talking about, understanding what you're actually working towards. Like Laura just mentioned, what's the end result? What do you expect to have happen? Being motivated by your values. Okay, the why of the thing. And I'm teasing a little bit something that's coming up in our workshop mid-year. We're going to be talking about the why of things. Why do you want things to happen? Not just the when and maybe how. Again, I talked about the flexibility of things, taking into account not everything happens perfectly, right? Life is not a linear progression. There's a lot of loop-de-loops going on. So you're ill, you're injured, you have a death in the family, it's too cold or too hot out, whatever happens, making sure that you acknowledge things happen. I'm not going to be 100% perfect with every single thing that I do. And focus on too some of the things that might, instead of subtracting something, I might talk about this too in one of the other slides coming up, but understanding that it's an incremental journey. So it's not so much about taking things away, but what am I missing from my life? What am I supposed to be creating to bring me joy, give me more permission, set boundaries, not just for myself, but with other people too, so I can have space to be able to navigate how I want to control or adapt or, end up addressing any kind of obstacles or barriers that come my way. Laura, I'll let you take the next half.
Sure. Yeah. So we really want this to be realistic to your current life circumstances. So a lot of the times, again, we were talking about earlier, people drop off a lot with their goals or their resolutions a lot of the time because it's like, oh, I just suddenly expect myself to have all of these extra resources. Or even if I never ever set up a lifestyle in which I wake up at 6 a.m., I'm suddenly going to wake up at 6 a.m. every day to work out. Like, that's not realistic to where you're currently at. Maybe that's a goal to work towards, right? And that's where the incremental steps come back in. But we got to think about like, what are your needs? What are your capabilities right now? What are the barriers? Do you have a lot of time devoted to childcare, for example, that cuts into your personal time? Like, that's a real thing for a lot of people. We have to be realistic or else we're not setting ourselves up for success. It's not sustainable without that. And then, my whole little thing on the cognitive distortions, like we need our resolutions and our goals to not be based in that, not in the all or nothing thinking, not in the fear-based catastrophizing, right? Not with the shooting on yourself. We want it to be based on our values. Um, So how do we do this? How do we create these sustainable resolutions with all of these different requirements, right? So again, word of this presentation, I guess, is realistic, right? We want to set realistic goals and expectations that allow for the flexibility that Dina was talking about, that allow for those unforeseen life circumstances, or even, I don't know, maybe by June of this year, your priorities are going to change a little bit. Maybe you meet someone and suddenly you're creating space in your life for that person, or maybe you're moving to another place and your needs change. So we want that to not derail your idea of what your goals are, your intentions are, but to embrace that and to be able to have that still be aligned. We want to address any of those cognitive distortions that we might find ourselves doing. And I just want to throw in here too, it's normal for the brain to do this. If you struggle with some of these things, you are absolutely not alone. This is the number one thing I start off with many folks on in therapy. We all do this. The brain is designed not to be your friend, but to keep you safe. And so sometimes it does that by throwing these radical ideas like, oh, you're going to like die if you go outside. Like, no, you're not going to. Let's not catastrophize. So we want to address when that's happening and challenge those thoughts. What's the evidence? What's really the situation here? Is there a more realistic, helpful, adaptive way to think about those things versus just the fear-based? Um, this is one of the hardest things for folks to do is to accept imperfections, right? Choosing to learn from mistakes rather than ruminate on them. Accepting that imperfections are inevitable. Number one, you can't avoid them. They will happen. Let's just accept that, right? But then also accept that they don't have to mean anything about you. I make mistakes all the time. I've probably stumbled over like half my words already, and hopefully no one here is judging me for that. And if you are, please don't, right? And so we want to accept that imperfections are inevitable and that it's okay because we all do them. That's part of the human experience. This is a huge, huge, huge thing when we're talking about sustainability. We have to celebrate our small wins and our small steps because if you're focused on, let's say there's a ladder in front of me and I'm on the first rung of the ladder and I'm like, yes, at the top of the ladder is my goal happening, right? My resolution coming true. If I'm only focused at the very top of the ladder, at the top of the building, that's quite a jump, right? If I'm only thinking about that, I would have to teleport to get there. That's not how it works. We have to take each step at a time. Those small wins really add up. And a lot of the times they give you confidence along the way. Oh my gosh, I did this thing. So I feel more motivated now to do this next part, right? They're showing you along the way that you can do hard things, that you're capable of achieving your goals, you're capable of achieving small wins. And so we really want to pause and celebrate those things and not just skirt over them and move on to the next thing and feel like, oh, I'm not there yet. It's not good enough. It is good enough. It's a starting place. Stop comparing yourself to others. I will scream that from the rooftops as much as I can. It's not helpful. Their starting place is not your starting place. Their circumstance is not your circumstance. Social media is a killer for this. It is so hard when we're talking about like the wellness space, when we're talking about the mental health space, when we're talking about, if you have a goal around, let's say, traveling, it is so hard not to compare yourself to those travel bloggers who are like living their best lives and getting paid to do it. You're like, how can that be my life? Um, but it's irrelevant to what you're looking at in your life. So if your resolutions are based in those comparisons, they are automatically unsustainable. They have to be based in you, your life, your values, your situation, your dreams, your goals. And then we're going to talk about this a little bit more later when we come to like the practical piece, but we want to practice mindfulness and coping skills in order to build resilience. That's crucial. So I'll save that for later.
All right, my favorite part of this discussion. I love a SMART goal. For those of you who followed me and or maybe even came to the webinar I had, I think at the end of I think November of last year, I did a whole presentation on SMART goals. And so what you're seeing on screen here is the definition of the acronym SMART. Maybe some of you have seen some of the words a little bit different, like sometimes attainable is achievable or realistic is relevant, but it's basically the same kind of setup, meaning that you're looking to clearly define what it is that you want to have happen. And Laura and I will share some examples, and we'll also toss it to those of you who are here with us to share some of your ideas of what a SMART goal might be, you want to make sure it's very specific. So we're talking about small incremental measures towards a larger particular outcome. Measuring things too, whether it's daytime or heart rate or your blood levels, whatever it is that you're looking to measure in some way to say, I've achieved that, I've accomplished it. A lot of the things that we're talking about today have to do with the A and the R, the attainable and the realistic approach to things. What is it that I actually can achieve? Is it within my realm? Do I have to do something else in order to get to that? Then I might have to back up a little bit and recreate a goal that is more realistic. And I want to stop here too, just to point out that the realistic part here is where I would also encourage you to give yourself permission to have flexibility and freedom. There is nothing wrong with being like, you know what, that didn't work out. Let me change that. Nobody's holding you accountable to these indicators. You're not working at some place where they're watching your sales every quarter. You're doing this for your own self. So if you need to go back and adjust things and be flexible about doing it, there's no shame in that game. And then time bound too. I mentioned earlier, we overestimate sometimes of what we can accomplish in a year. So maybe taking some smaller steps towards that, giving yourself some breathing space, especially for trial and error, so that you can adjust accordingly and make some of those changes as the months, weeks, meals progress, hours, whatever, however you're incrementally designing for yourself these goals in a time bound way.
So what does a SMART goal look like in action, right? So we have some examples here about how this might show up in each of our, fields. So for example, if I want to, maybe my overarching like intention or idea is I just want to like sleep better. Well, that's not a that's a great intention, but it's not, measurable. It's not time bound. It's not specific at all. And it also doesn't tell me how to get there. It's like the end result, but it has nothing to do with the process. So I don't actually have, my instruction manual in front of me, which is going to make it really hard. So an example of maybe a way to improve my sleep, an actual smart, sustainable goal for improving my sleep. And this is so real because I didn't sleep well last night. So I will be doing this is to practice a deep breathing exercise technique before bed at least 3 times a week for the next month. And notice here that I said for the next month. Do I think I'm going to magically have better sleep? My entire sleep cycle is going to be improved in the next month? No. But I like that this is time bound for me to be able to check in on how it's going and maybe make some changes. That's the flexibility we're talking about, right? If it really helps, maybe I want to increase how often I'm doing it. If I'm noticing that it's maybe not helping, maybe I want to try a different deep breathing exercise or I want to try a different mechanism. But this gives you those automatic places where you can pause, check in, revisit your intention and make adjustments, which is super, super important. Similarly, I might decide to, if I want to, I don't know, be nicer to myself, which is a goal, that I really encourage everyone to work towards. Not very specific, not telling me how to do that, not giving me any guidance. I might say, I want to start every weekday with a positive affirmation to practice positive self-talk. I might want to, focus on like trying different affirmations, trying different, strategies here, and then give myself that opportunity to check in, see how it's going, and celebrate small wins if they're happening, which usually they are when we stop to recognize them.
And on my side here with examples 3 and 4, so this is a SMART goal that, say, for the first one on example 3, if I say to myself, I find myself every day of the week that I'm working long hours, I forget to bring something with me, I'm making impulse purchases, or I'm maybe going without any food during my lunch break, like I'm sitting there and working. And I know a lot of you that have signed up for this or who follow at least me on the social media world, you're students and you're interns and you've got a lot going on, a lot of things juggling, but you're also a human person that needs fuel. And you also have to have some brain power. So it helps to make sure that you're keeping fed throughout the day. So one example of a SMART goal there could be set a timer or set an alarm for yourself the night before. Every night, you're going to spend 30 minutes packing something, whether it's leftover things, whether you're creating a meal from scratch, whether you're putting together a sandwich, whatever the case may be, you're setting that up for yourself for 30 minutes and you're doing it just for 1 week. And you'll see how that goes. And maybe it's just the one meal for lunch at that point, and then you can kind of figure out if that's working, what's not working, assess the situation, and again, make some changes if you need to. That bottom one too is about being mindful. So Laura mentioned the mindfulness discussion earlier. So if you don't have the greatest relationship with food, if you're just now starting to ease into allowing yourself to really eat and enjoy, and not just in the nourishment factor with macronutrients and micronutrients and all the things that come with the, science and the molecules of what feeds your body to be able to perform its cellular duties, but also having fun foods, indulging yourself, grabbing a treat or something, allowing yourself just to sit and pause for a moment. Some people do this if they say, if they say grace at a table, then that could be something that comes to mind when you think of it. But really, just having 1 minute before you sit down to lunch, you place your meal in front of you and just look at it. Maybe you say, I'm grateful for this food. Maybe you're setting an intention to really savor the things that you've made for yourself or something that you purchased for yourself, and allow yourself to have a little bit more mindfulness around that. Okay, so now we're going to open it up to all of you. If you are multitasking, come on back. Share, share with us. If you are not too shy, share with us in the chat. What is something that maybe you're working on currently? How would you create a SMART goal for yourself? I'm gonna maybe set the alarm for like 1 minute or so, Laura, and we'll just give a
Sure.
minute of silence. And anybody who'd like to share a SMART goal, or if you want to have an idea of a SMART goal, and we'll take a look and see if there's anything that we need to help you adjust. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute, and I'll open it up to whoever is online with us right now to put in the chat. What is a SMART goal that you might want to work on or share with us if you're trying to create one, but you're not sure how to do it? Okay, I see AJ threw something in the chat there, updating my design portfolio. AJ,
That's a good
Laura,
example.
can we chime in on that and give some feedback, or should we wait and see if anyone else pops in first, and then we'll provide some insight?
Yeah, let's give it a moment.
Okay. Thank you,
This is
AJ.
such a good example too, because that's a
Hmm.
great, like, my resolution for this year is to update my design portfolio, right? And that's obviously value centered and intention centered, but it doesn't give this person a roadmap on how to get there. That's the sustainable SMART goal piece that we're talking about. So yeah, I'm excited to work with this one.
Yeah. Anyone else want to throw anything else in the chat? We have about another 30 seconds or so left. And by the way, just like what AJ just did, doesn't have to be health and wellness related. It could be career development, personal relationships, whatever it is that you want to put in there. Hema, thank you. First of all, I know Hema, and Hema, I am very excited about that goal. I'm very excited about that goal. I love that. So Hema wants to become a yoga instructor by mid 2025. And Laura, you and I can also add some other examples too. But should we start with AJ? What's some of your feedback on
Yeah.
AJ's goal?
Yeah. So if we're wanting to make this, I'll see. Oh, I
I
love that
love that. Thank
one
you,
too.
SS. Thank you.
So if we want to make this specific and measurable to start out, right? So updating my design portfolio, how would we, the first question to ask yourself is how do we measure that, right? What's sort of the metric that you're going to be looking at to see, oh, I've done the thing. I've updated my portfolio. Maybe that one's just like as simple as working on it. Maybe there's a certain number of pieces that you want, a certain organizational strategy you want for your portfolio. So that's sort of the piece to figure out, like, how do I make this measurable. And then, obviously, I'm assuming if this is a goal that you have, that it's attainable for you, right? That the design is something that you have skill set in and ability to do. How do we make this realistic with your and flexible with your lifestyle, with your current commitments? Where are you finding the time to do that? Where is that coming from? And at what point, time bound, are you wanting to check in with yourself and see how have I done with this goal? Those would be some of my starting places, Dina. I don't know if you have a
Yeah,
suggestion.
I agree with that too. So AJ, you might want to give us a thumbs up if that makes sense. So what you have is the end result is I want to update my design portfolio. And Laura's asking you to kind of make that a little bit more specific or granular, like by when, what's the first things that you're going to do. So maybe you carve out 2 hours a week every week for the next month or 2 months or 3 months that you're solely working on that and you're focusing in your design portfolio. And then maybe you need
Yeah.
to do some edits or whatever. I love that. Thank you, Laura. I'll take Hima's and then I'll ask you to chime in on that too. So Hima, kind of the same approach there, right? So become a yoga instructor by mid 2025 is the end result. So ideally there, and I know a little bit about yoga instruction, so I'm assuming you have to apply for a training, you have to attend the training classes, you have to maybe do some sort of you have to put together, I think, like a class yourself and put that in front of whoever is doing the instruction for you, who's like the teacher for that. So again, is that look up yoga classes, look up training classes, look up setting aside finances to make sure that I can afford what I need to do and however much it costs you. So again, implementing some of those things little by little across the board. I hope that that's helpful too. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And so for Razaz, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and I apologize if I'm not. Apply and get the internship for dietitian. So that's a great start, right? So you've got kind of the action-oriented piece here, the attainable piece, apply and get the internship. So I guess, if we're thinking about this in a sustainability and SMART goal context, how like what are the steps needed for getting the internship? What does that look like? And by what time are you hoping to do that? So we want this to be really action oriented on your part, not just like, there's a time and place for manifesting for sure, but we want to make sure that we're focusing on like, how do I make this sustainable for my life with where it's at? And how can I contribute action towards that?
Razaz is currently one of my students, so I'm excited to help you meet that goal. We will definitely talk,
Yes.
we will talk in our classes how to make that actionable. Okay, just to keep an eye on our time here, let's advance through the next couple of things because I know these are a little bit hefty, and Laura, you're going to share with us a little bit more insight on these coming slides. Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone, by the way, for putting in your goals in there.
Yes, thank you for sharing. I will speed through some of these, but resilience is really the meat of what we're talking about. So we've made our sustainable SMART goals, let's say, right? We have our goals, we know what we're working towards. Now, what happens when the curveballs come in? Because they will, right? So resilience defined is basically the ability to cope with and recover from setbacks. We know setbacks will happen. We don't know when or how they will happen, but they will. And so we want to build resilience in order to maintain our commitment to those goals and therefore our commitment to ourselves. So this is a key piece. Resilience does not mean that you force yourself to like the outcome of a bad situation, right? But rather it means that you accept that as a reality that's happening. You don't try to fight it, you don't get in a power struggle with it, but you try to adapt to the situation and manage the emotional impact in a healthy way. So you can read the slide here. Resilience is some of these things, it's not some of these things. Most importantly, it is a skill that you can build.
Oh, my bad. Let me go advance. There we go.
I just want to throw this in here. Like, how does resilience play into resolutions, right? We sort of talked about this already. Unexpected obstacles will happen as you create resolutions. You want to be able to adapt to those things. You want to be able to accept the situation and pivot as needed. This is the flexibility piece that we've been kind of hammering throughout the entire presentation. Building resilience allows you to cope with challenges that get in the way of your resolutions and adjust when necessary rather than giving up on your goals, which is what a lot of people end up doing because they maybe don't know how to build that resilience or they don't know how to use those skills to guide them through.
Mhm.
So how do we build resilience, right? This is really the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about. My first thing that I always work with clients on and that I try to incorporate in my own life is practicing mindfulness. So you might have heard of mindfulness in a lot of different ways. It can encompass deep breathing, it can encompass meditation, visualizing, sensory grounding, all these other things. But the goal here is to stay present in the moment. When we get hit with an unexpected emotional situation, we usually do what I call time traveling. Either we're catastrophizing about a future thing that's happening or we're ruminating on something that's happened in the past and that makes us feel bad. And so we want to stay present because otherwise we're not going to be reacting to the situation as is. We're going to be reacting to something else, and that's not helpful.
I think this top right one here with the social connection is so huge. A lot of times, especially for people who might be, keeping the cards to themselves, you don't have to tell everybody everything in your life. But I think walking through some sort of, if it's talk therapy with your therapist, if it's journaling things out, if it's making sure you're meeting with people and saying, hey, I need you to keep an eye on me. I'm going to be working on some stuff. I would love for you to maybe have an accountability check in with me or just support me because I'm making some changes in my life and I might want to reach out to you just to give me some guidance or just to say I need an ear to listen to. So having some sort of support, whether it's a clergy person, a healthcare provider, your friends and family. By the way, choose those wisely because not everybody's going to be on on your side sometimes. So with that said too, avoiding the self-sabotage, Laura mentioned a lot of this too, especially if you are, and I'm still working through my process of this. I don't want to say setting yourself up for failure, but making sure that you're not you're I should say you're allowing yourself the ability to grow, but not putting yourself up in a position where you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming, when you probably did. So maybe thinking a little bit proactively, allowing yourself to look through the steps of what you need to do without, again, coming in a little too hot, and scaling back, allowing that flexibility and freedom to happen if you need to do
Yeah.
or make any
Sorry.
kind of game day
Can you go back,
decisions.
Dina?
Of course, of course.
Thank you. I just want to add on to that too, that like
Yeah.
a lot of times self-sabotage can look like, as you mentioned, maybe investing in people who are not super supportive of you. It can look like using substances to cope. It can look
Mm.
like, potentially emotional eating would be an example that I see in my clients as well at times. And so you want to be really careful. Doom scrolling, another one.
Hmm.
You want to be really careful about like, are the choices that I'm making building the tomorrow that I want, or are they, maybe providing instant gratification but not actually, contributing to the goal that I have. And with that, I think connecting with your inner self is a big piece of this. You want to pay attention to what's triggering you. You want to pay attention to what thoughts you're having, what emotions you're having, how that's impacting your behavior. What are you avoiding, what are you doing? And so really what we're talking about with this is practicing curiosity, right? So when those cognitive distortions come in, we want to be curious about that.
Oh my gosh, thank you for elaborating on that. That's very helpful.
Yeah. In a similar vein, this is a fancy word, psychological flexibility, but basically, this is the idea of like accepting, again, the situation as it is, not trying
Mhm.
to fight it, not trying to get in a power struggle. You can't control everything that's happening around you, but you can control how you respond to it. And so rather than trying to, getting stuck or fixating on the lack of control we have about the situation or the curveball, how can you hone in on, well, where do I have some control here? And you can learn and grow from those challenges. Practicing gratitude is another really great way
Mm.
to build resilience. It's not saying, oh, like just think positive, right? We don't want to go into toxic positivity territory, but we want to redirect our attention maybe to things that we do have, or things that are helpful to us, or things that we are grateful for, rather than ruminating on all the things that are going wrong. It helps to develop new ways of thinking and fight those cognitive distortions. Finding purpose. This is a huge piece of resilience. And this is so much of what we're talking about, because hopefully our resolutions are based in our values, right? And our values come from the things that give us a sense of purpose or meaning. So if you're feeling really let down by something that's happened, or you're feeling really defeated about maybe how your resolution is going, can you find meaning or purpose by contributing to a cause you care about, or by, doing something that's really like meaningful to you, maybe within your social group or just on a personal level? But how do you redirect your attention on something that you care deeply about? And then lastly, using coping and grounding skills. And I can do and have done an entire presentation on like what those look like. And if anyone wants ideas for what some of these things can look like, please reach out to me after the presentation and we can talk about that. But just real quick, I'll say things that are going to help keep you centered and emotionally regulated when shit hits the fan, so to speak. Right? So you want to express or process your emotions in a healthy way. That could look like journaling. That could look like deep breathing. That could look like grounding. It could look like playing your favorite video game to help you process an emotion. It could look like reading a book. It could look like exercising or going for a walk. What you want to do here is create some space from the situation to help you respond in a way that is values aligned and intentional, rather than just react emotionally because your nervous system is activated.
Oh my gosh, yes. All right, kids, listen, now you got some takeaways, right? We just shared with you a lot of information. So by the time in the next couple of days when you receive the recording link for this, try to process some things. Take into account whatever you feel is necessary and whatever resonates with you. But we're going to give you some next steps. Number one, I'm going to share with you on the next slide in a second of what this is looking like. We're going to give you a little 30-day building resilience challenge. I'm going to share with you in a sec what that looks like. I'm going to ask you also to think about those SMART goals, right? So for those of you who threw into the chat what you want to have as a long-term outcome, start developing a plan. Maybe, I only have 6 hours a week to put towards creating my design portfolio, or I want to start working on something every half hour or every Saturday. Start developing a plan for yourself that integrates those SMART goals. And then In a to be determined date, Laura and I are still working on this. We're going to do
TBD.
a TBD. We're going to do a 6-month follow-up. Now, obviously, we share a lot of free resources. These webinars are always free, but the workshop is going to be, I hope, affordable, low cost, however your budget allows. But we are going to put together a bit of a heftier type of workshop for us to really go through and have some interactive discussions, some deep thinking and deep work within that mid-year range. So here's a great time to think to yourself, what can I accomplish in the 6 months to come, whether that's June, July, August area. And when Laura and I have more details and confirm all this information, we'll shoot the information out to all of you, and you can set your schedule and make sure that you check in with us and give yourself a little accountability check-in. So here's what the 30-day Building Resilience Challenge is going to look like. It's really just a bingo card. We've designed it a 5x5 with a free space in the middle. So 30 days within the 30 days that you're setting yourself up for, whether that's starting tomorrow, because is tomorrow technically
Yeah,
1st of
tomorrow's the
February, right?
first.
So, and look, it's a leap year, so you get 29 days tomorrow for February. Or maybe you pick another month, whatever it is that you want to do. But we've actually allowed you 24 different things that you can kind of check off for yourself. I listened to the negative self-talk that was happening, and I was able to overcome that, or at least just be aware of it and correct that.
Right.
Or, as Laura mentioned, I sat down and I practiced gratitude. I was feeling all up in my head and I was getting really down on something, but you know what? I stopped for a minute and I said, I'm really grateful for something. So we're going to share this with you in the follow-up email, and you'll have that as a downloadable card that you can print out or
And
keep
the
on your,
reason why we didn't want it to be 30 days with
yeah,
30 tasks is because this whole time we've been
space
talking about not being a perfectionist. And if I have to do something for every
every
day
day.
for 30 days, I know I probably won't do it. So
Exactly.
use this as an example of how you can practice flexibility, of how you can start to challenge some of that perfectionism. We're
Yeah,
so used to 30-day challenges being every day. We're going to challenge that. So don't feel pressured.
exactly. Thank you, Laura. All right, so we're going to open it up all to you with the handful of minutes that we have left here. If you would like to open up your mic or put your hand up, any questions that you might have for us. And as you are getting
Yeah.
your thoughts together, I'll advance to the next slide.
And if you have to leave at the hour, please feel free, but we will stay on just a couple minutes if someone
Yeah,
has questions that go over a little bit.
absolutely. So I'll give a second to see if anyone's throwing any information in the chat. What are some of the things that are inspiring you? What are some of your takeaways right now? Is it making you feel excited about doing something? Is it making you feel a little bit nervous about, like, I really have to start thinking of how I react to things, or, not giving myself grace and now I'm allowing myself grace, or I have to have some uncomfortable but necessary discussions with people to start setting boundaries? What is it that you think you might put into play? So feel free to share in the chat if you have any questions or anything that you'd like for us to clarify or comment on. And if not, Laura, I guess we can hang out for another minute
Just
in case anybody
explained
has typing.
everything so clearly, right? And maybe some of this has to simmer. I know when I get information overload, it takes a minute, right?
Yeah.
So after you get the recording, feel free to email us or connect with us. We would actually really love to connect with you. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. I'm most active on Instagram at Laura Sgro LCSW. So I would love to see you guys there.
Yeah. And same with me. I am on social media platforms that I don't even use. I just immediately jumped on everything and just secured Dish with Dina. So I'm on Pinterest and Snapchat and
Oh my God.
Clubhouse, but I never go on those things. I'm like Laura, I'm usually mostly on Instagram. Thank you, Razaz. That's wonderful. Exactly. Give yourself some grace. No, I know what you're going through with the dietetic internship. So there could be some challenging, competition and things along the lines of, like, procuring whatever you need to do within a certain amount of time so that you can move into that. So we'll try to see how we can help you prioritize and give yourself a little bit of grace in that too. Everybody,
Thank you. Thank
Laura,
you.
thank
Hmm.
you. Oh,
Thank
wait,
you.
is somebody opening up here? You wanted to chime in? Go ahead. Oh, you're welcome, Razaz. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Of
Really is.
course. Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
just
we
taking a
hope
look.
this was helpful. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to everyone who's going to be watching the recording as well. We really hope that this is helpful. And if you have follow-up questions or want more feedback about how to implement this, just feel free to reach out to us.
Yes. And we'll see you again, hopefully in 6 months or whatever the next
Yes.
thing is that we're doing together coming up. Thanks,
Yes.
everybody.
All right, take
Bye.
care.